Bible. Or they make one of the arguments you talked about earlier, the fine-tuning argument or something like that. But an argument is not the same thing as evidence. You know, we weren't convinced of you know, the laws of thermodynamics by a compelling argument. We were convinced by evidence. Weren't convinced of quantum reality by a convincing fucking argument or a soaring oratory. We were convinced by evidence. Weren't convinced of the Big Bang because it sounded cool. We were convinced by evidence. So, you know, presenting an argument as if the argument itself is evidence, that doesn't work. Presenting a fucking book of ancient stories as if that's evidence doesn't work, because tons of cultures have mythologies. Tons of cultures have believed various things about various deities. That doesn't mean all of those deities are true. It just means that human beings have a predilection towards creating creation myths and explaining the world through the lens of all-powerful beings that hold our fates in.
You serious?
Stupid. What would your response be to that?
People online love to say X is not evidence. Just throw, you know, arguments, claims. Someone said probability is not evidence today on YouTube. I saw it, and it's like, what are these people talking about? Like, I just, I don't know. I just think they're very disconnected from the way I think most epistemologists are thinking about things. And one thing to note is that the more things you say, that's not evidence, that's not evidence, that's not evidence, the more trouble you're going to have justifying many common sense beliefs. Like my belief, again, that it's 9:47, there's a lamp here, my car is parked there. I mean, if you just like start saying these things don't count as evidence, I think you're going to really get into skepticism. And maybe you're right that when they say arguments aren't evidence, they're thinking of something like two people yelling at each other. But you know, that maybe that could involve an argument, but you know, in most cases it would probably be more appeals to emotion and rhetoric. But like, no one's saying that people yelling at each other is evidence. And you know, we talked about the philosophical definition of arguments above, where there's premises and they support a conclusion. I mean, that like the premises are absolutely evidence for the conclusion, unless you just have this terrible argument. But in almost all cases, arguments are going to be a paradigm example of evidence. They're one of the best sources of evidence that we have. So in my critical thinking series, I explain a little bit more about, you know, what makes an argument a good one versus a bad one. But I just think this idea that arguments are not evidence is total nonsense. So I completely agree with you.